FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover in 1956 on this quiet weapons for silent wars says, "The individual is handicapped by coming face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists. The people's mind simply has not come to realization of the evil which has been introduced into our midst. It rejects even the assumption that human creatures could espouse a philosophy which must ultimately destroy all this is good and decent." John F. Kennedy's speech, "For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system that has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations." And Samuel Adams goes to say, "No people will tamely surrender their liberties, nor can any be easily subdued, when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved. On the contrary, when people are universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink under their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders." Short list of outputs. Outputs create controlled situations. Manipulations of the economy, hence society, controlled by control of compensation and income. The sequence: allocate opportunities, then destroy the opportunities. Control the economic environment, control the availability of raw materials, controls capital, controls bank rates, controls the inflation of the currency, controls the possession of property, controls industrial capacity, controls manufacturing, controls the availability of goods, commodities, controls the price of commodities, controls services, the labour force, etc., controls payments to government officials, controls legal functions, controls the personal data files, uncorrectably by the party slandered, controls advertising, controls media contact, controls material available for TV viewing, engages emotions, creates disorder, chaos and insanity, controls desire of more probing tax forms, controls surveillance, controls the storage of information, develops psychological analysis and profiles on individuals, controls legal functions. It's a repeat of number 15. Controls sociological factors. Controls health options, preys on weakness, cripples strengths, leeches wealth and substance. Now the table of strategy here for them to do this is to do this, keep the public ignorant. To get this, less public organisation. Maintaining access to control point for feedback. Require reaction to outputs, prices and sales. They need to do, create preoccupation. To get this, they lower defence. To do this, they create an attack on the family unit. To get this, control the education of the young. To do this, give less cash and more credit and doles. To get this, more self-indulgence and more data. To do this, attack the privacy of the church. To get this, destroy faith in this sort of government. Do this, social conformity. To get this, computer programming simplicity. Do this, minimize the tax protest. To get this, maximum economic data, minimizing enforcement problems. Stabilize the consent, simplicity, coefficients, tighten control of variables. Simpler computer input data, greater predictability. Establish boundary conditions. Problem simplicity solutions of differential and difference equations. Proper timing, less data shift and blurring. Maximizing control, minimum resistance to control. Collapse of currency. To get that, they destroy the faith of the American people in each other. That goes for anybody. Destroy the faith of people in each other. Diversion is the primary strategy. Experience has proven that the simplest method of securing a silent weapon and gaining control of the public is to keep the public undisciplined and ignorant of the basic system principles on the one hand, while keeping them confused, disorganized and distracted with matters of no real importance on the other hand. This is achieved by disengaging their minds, sabotaging their mental activities, providing a low-quality program of public education in mathematics, logic, systems design and economics, and discouraging technical creativity. Also achieved by engaging their emotions, increasing their self-indulgence and their indulgence in emotional and physical activities by unrelentingly emotional affrontations and attacks, mental and emotional rape by way of constant barrage of sex, violence and wars in the media, especially the TV and the newspapers. Giving them what they desire in excess, junk food for thought, and depriving them of what they really need. Rewriting history and law and subjecting the public to the divergent creation, thus being able to shift their thinking from personal needs to highly fabricated outside priorities. These preclude their interest in and discovery of silent weapons of social automation technology. The general rule is that there is a profit in confusion. The more confusion, the more profit. Therefore, the best approach is to create problems and then offer solutions. Media. Keep the adult public attention diverted away from the real social issues and captivate by matters of no real great importance. Schools. They keep the young public ignorant of real mathematics, real economics, real law and real history. Entertainment. Keep the public entertainment below a 6th grade level. Work. Keep the public busy, with no time to think. Back on the farm with the other animals. Consent now, guys, is the primary victor. A silent weapon system operates upon data obtained from a docile public by legal, but not always lawful, force. Much information is made available to silent weapons system programmers through the Internal Revenue Services, or here in Australia, the ATO. This information consists of the enforced delivery of well-organised data contained in federal and state tax forms, collected, assembled and submitted by slave labour provided by taxpayers and employers. Furthermore, the number of such forms submitted to the ATO is a useful indicator of public consent, as important factors in strategic decision making. Other data sources are given in the short list of inputs. Consent coefficients. Numerically, take 2. Consent coefficients. Numerically, feedback indicating victor status. Psychological basis. When the government is able to collect tax and seize private property with just compensation, it is an indication that the public is ripe for surrender and is consenting to enslavement and legal encroachment. A good and easily quantified indicator of harvest time is the number of public citizens who pay income tax despite an obvious lack of reciprocal or honest services from the government. An amplification of the energy source. The next step in the process of designing an economic amplifier is discovering the energy sources. The energy sources which support any primitive economic systems are, of course, a supply of raw materials, and the consent of the people to labour and consequently, assume a certain rank, position, level, or class in the social structure, to provide labour at various levels in the pecking order. Each class is guaranteeing its own level of income, controls of the class immediately below it, hence preserves the class structure. This provides stability and security, but also government from the top. As time goes on and communication and education improve, the lower class elements of the social labour structure become knowledgeable and envious of the good things that the upper class members have. They also begin to attain a knowledge of energy systems and the ability to enforce their rise through the class structure. This threatens the sovereignty of the elite. If this rise of the lower class can be postponed long enough, the elite can achieve energy dominance, and labour by consent no longer will hold a position of an essential energy source. Until such energy dominance is absolutely established, the consent of the people to labour and let others handle their affairs must be taken into consideration, since failure to do so could cause the people to interfere in the final transfer of energy sources to the control of the elite. It is essential to recognise that at this time, public consent is still an essential key to the release of energy in the process of economic amplification. Therefore, consent as an energy release mechanism will now be considered. Logistics. The successful application of a strategy requires a careful study of inputs, outputs, the strategy connecting the inputs and the outputs, and the available energy source to fuel the strategy. This study is called logistics. The logistical problem is studied at the elemental level first, and then levels of greater complexity are studied as a synthesis of elementary factors. This means that a given system is analysed, i.e., broken down into subsystems, and these in turn are analysed, until by this process one arrives at the logistical atom of the individual. This is where the process of synthesis properly begins, at the time of birth of the individual. The artificial womb. From the time a person leaves its mother's womb, its every effort is directed towards building, maintaining, and withdrawing into artificial wombs, various sorts of substitute protective devices or shells. The objective of these artificial wombs is to provide a stable environment for both stable and unstable activity, to provide a shelter for the evolutionary process of growth and maturity, i.e. survival, to provide security for freedom, and to provide defensive protection for offensive activity. This is equally true of both the general public and the elite. However, there is a definite difference in the way each of these classes go about the solution of problems. The political structure of a nation and the dependency. The primary reason why the individual citizens of a country create a political structure is a subconscious wish or desire to perpetuate their own dependency relationship of childhood. Simply put, they want a human god to eliminate all risk from their life, pat them on the head, kiss their bruises, put a chicken on every dinner table, clothe their bodies, tuck them into bed at night, and tell them that everything will be alright when they wake up in the morning. This public demand is incredible, so the human god, the politician, meets incredibility with incredibility by promising the world and delivering nothing. So who is the bigger liar, the public or the godfather? This public behaviour is surrender born of fear, laziness, and expectancy. It is the basis of the welfare state as a strategic weapon useful against a distinguished public. Actually, it's useful against a disgusting public, because that is quite disgusting. That's something of a child, not of a maturing spiritual energy force experiencing life. Action, offence. Most people want to be able to subdue and or kill another human being which disturbs their daily lives. but they do not want to have to cope with the moral and religious issues which such an overt act of their part might raise. Therefore, they assign the dirty work to others, including their own children, so as to keep the blood off of their hands. They rave about the humane treatment of animals and then sit down to a delicious hamburger from a whitewashed slaughterhouse down the street and out of sight. But even more hypocritical, they pay taxes to finance a professional association of hitmen collectively called politicians and then complain about the corruption in government. Responsibility. Again, most people want to be free to do the things, to explore, etc., but they are afraid to fail. The fear of failure is manifested in irresponsibility, and especially in delegating those personal responsibilities to others where success is uncertain or carries possible or created liabilities, that law, which the person is not prepared to accept. They want authorities, root word, author, but they will not accept responsibility or liability, so they hire politicians to face reality for them. So in summary, the people hire the politicians so that the people can obtain security without managing it, obtain action without thinking about it, inflict theft, injury, and death upon others without having to contemplate either life or death, avoid responsibility for their own intentions, obtain the benefits of reality and science without exerting themselves in the discipline of facing or learning either of these things. They give the politicians the power to create and manage a war machine, provide for the survival of the nation womb, prevent encroachment of anything upon the nation or the womb, destroy the enemy who threatens the nation or the womb, destroy those citizens of their own country who do not conform for the sake of the stability of the nation or the womb. Politicians hold many quasi-military jobs, the lowest being the police, which are soldiers, the attorneys and CPAs next, who are spies and saboteurs, licensed, and the judges who shout orders and run the closed union military shop for whatever the market will bear. The generals are industrialists. The presidential level of commanders-in-chief is shared by the international bankers. The people know that they have created this farce and financed it with their own taxes and consent. But they would rather knuckle under than be the hypocrite. Thus, a nation becomes divided into two very distinct parts: a docile subnation, great silent majority, and a political subnation. The political subnation remains attached to the docile subnation. It tolerates it and leaches its substance till it grows strong enough to detach itself and then devour its parents. System analysis. In order to make a meaningful computerized economic decisions about war, the primary economic flywheel, it is necessary to assign concrete logistical values to each element of the war structure, personal and material alike. This process begins with a clear and candid description of the subsystems of such structure. The military service, the draft. Few efforts of human behaviour modifications are more remarkable or more effective than that of the socio-military institution known as the draft. A primary purpose of a draft or other such institution is to instill by intimidation the young males of society the uncritical conviction that the government is omnipotent. He is soon taught that a prayer is slow to reverse what a bullet can do in an instant. Thus, a man trained in a religious environment for 18 years of his life can, by this instrument of the government, be broken down, by purged of his fantasies and delusions in a matter of mere months. Once that conviction is instilled, all else becomes easy to instill. Even more interestingly is the process by which a young man's parents, who purportedly love him, can be induced to send him off to war to his death. Although the scope of this work will not allow this matter to be expanded in full detail, nevertheless, A coarse overview will be possible and can severely to reveal those factors which must be included in some numerical form in a computer analysis of social and war systems. We begin with a tentative definition of the draft. The draft, selective services, etc., is an institution of compulsory collective sacrifice and slavery, devised by the middle-aged and elderly for the purpose of pressing the young into doing the public dirty work. It further serves to make the youth as guilty as the elders, thus making criticism of the elders by the youth less likely. That's a generational stabiliser. It is marketed and sold to the public under the label of patriotic or national service. Once a candid economic definition of the draft is achieved, that definition is used to outline the boundaries of a structure called a human value system, which in turn is translated into the terms of game theory. The value of such a slave labourer is given in a table of human values, a table broken down into categories by intellect, experience, post-service job, demand, etc. Some of these categories are ordinarily and can be tentatively evaluated in terms of the value of certain jobs for which a known fee exists. Some jobs are harder to value because they are unique to the demands of social subversion. For an extreme example, the value of a mother's instruction to her daughter, causing that daughter to put certain behavioural demands upon a future husband 10 or 15 years, thus by suppressing her resistance to a perversion of our government, making it easier for a banking cartel to buy the state of New York in, say, 20 years. Such a problem leans heavily upon the observation and data of wartime espionage and many types of psychological testing, but crude mathematical models, algorithms, etc., can be devised, if not to predict, at least to predetermine these events with maximum certainty. What does not exist by natural cooperation is thus enhanced by calculated compulsion. Human beings are machines, levers which may be grasped and turned, and there is little real difference between automating a society and automating a shoe factory. These derived values are variable. It is necessary to use a current table of human values for computing analysis. These values are given in true measure rather than the US dollar, since the latter is unstable, being presently inflated beyond the production of natural goods and services so as to give the economy a false kinetic energy, a paper indutance.